So, what's up, guys? Sorry if my energy feels a bit different. It is currently 10 p.m. at night, and I just got done recording like 3 hours worth of one video. I'm immediately recording the next video immediately after that because, to be completely honest with you, I am a bit excited for this video, and I don't know if I can wait until tomorrow to record it. So, man, where do we even begin? So we're still talking about the game. We're still talking about the game itself. So once again, we've already gone over Act 1, which is your commitment to yourself, and then Episode 2 of Act 1, which was if I can remember, the commitment to the game or something like that, or the game rules, or the game characters. I don't even know anymore. And then Act 2 was the game characters, and then whatever else we talked about. And now we're on Act 3. We're currently learning the game. Let me go back through my notes here, actually, so we can keep everything in order. So we're currently on Act 3. So we're going over the game rules. So we're going over the hard truths of trading, and understanding these hard truths, and knowing what they are, and putting concepts behind them, and anchor points to think, like just making these concepts easier to absorb, and then being able to identify them on a chart. We're just going over the hard truths, the game rules. Okay, so once again, at this point, we've already put the game into the game system. We've put the disc into the game system. It's spun up. We've already hit the start button. Now we're on the main screen. Like, we're on the main game screen, okay? Before we start playing the game, and playing the game is placing orders, placing trades, and making money. Before we start playing the game, we need to learn the game rules, the hard truths of the game, right? We're in the tutorial right now. So in the last video, we went over a couple things, right? It was mainly the trend, and the trend shows the overall campaign story. And inside of that overall story that day, I showed you how you can either look to take a overall story trade, or how you can look to take a side quest within that overall story. However, there are some other things that we need before we can just go off and be the best trader in the world. Everything requires context in trading. Nothing works if you don't have context, especially higher time frame context. And by that, what I mean is everything that I'm showing you, it exists, like everything, okay? Everything that I'm showing you, it exists on every time frame, but the higher up in the time frames you go, when those things happen, they hold more meaning, and they're less likely not to do what they're supposed to do, right? That's what that means when I say that. So they're less likely going to do what they're supposed to do when you see them on a higher time frame. That's what I mean by that. It holds more weight when you go up in the time frame. So we must understand what these hard truths are, so that we can take advantage of these hard truths, okay? And the reason I keep saying that, guys, is because, like, when I was starting out, first of all, once again, I didn't have anybody to really teach me what any of this stuff was or how to use it all together. But, like, I would hear people say, oh, supply and demand is stupid, or support and resistance is dumb, it's baby stuff. Like, man, I quickly learned bro, what I'm showing you, this is how the market moves. Like, this is how the game is played. This is the game. Like, this, bro, oh my fucking head. I'm sorry, I'm pissed off because, like, I would have saved so much fucking time if, like, I would have stopped just listening to the fucking bullshit that was being fed into me by all these different fucking YouTubers. Bro, these are the hard truths. These are the fucking game. This is how the game is played. This is how the game moves, okay? You just need to understand these concepts, which is why we're breaking them down in video game terms. And don't worry, at the end of all this, we're going to tie it all together, literally all of it, and we're going to put it all on the screen, right? And we're going to make it all make sense. And we're going to learn how to take a trade with it, and you're eventually going to be able to do it yourself. And then, if you're still confused, one, you can comment, because I'll reply to it, I promise. Or two, you can join the Discord. ask people in the community. Well, if there's people in there, I'm very small, but at me or DM me on Discord, okay? Or schedule a one-on-one with me. I have links down in my description where you can do that, and we can either talk one-on-one or, I mean, I can't make you care. I can't make you care more than you want to care. You know what I mean? It's completely up to you. But anyways, so we took a deep dive into that. So I want to continue off of the what we were talking about, the whole trend thing. So something we were discussing in the last video was the overall trend. So like an overall trend down, and hopefully you did your homework, because if you didn't, you need to pause this video right now and you need to go back and watch the previous video and go do your fucking homework, or this isn't going to make any sense to you, okay? In the last video, we talked about the overall trend. The overall trend is visually what you see, like you see visually from point A to point B, that this went down, basically, okay? In dumb terms, right? Because we're smooth brains here. A visual representation of the narrative of the story going down, okay? That is all it is. And what we discussed was inside that narrative is just built up of a bunch of fighting between heroes and villains. But since it is going down, right? Since it is the overall narrative is going down, it just tells us that within that narrative, the villains are just overall winning, okay? So the two things we can do with inside of this narrative is either look for a side quest, a counter side quest mission, or we can look to follow the overall narrative, right? That's what we discussed. Well, something we didn't discuss was, well, Dom, Big Daddy Chocolate Dom. How do we know when, that was sus, I don't know why I said that. How do we know when the overall narrative changes? Okay, to answer that question, you have to understand something, okay? So, markets are either moving up because the heroes are pushing it up overall. Remember, when you hear me say the word overall, you need to think narrative, okay? The narrative, okay? When markets are moving up, that just means that the overall, the heroes are moving the market up. This is known as an uptrend. Let me just get this, my writing is horrible. This is known as an uptrend, okay? The heroes are winning the narrative. That's all that means. Don't get confused. Okay, I'll say one more time. So, when price is moving up, that is known as an uptrend. All it means is that the heroes are winning that current narrative. So, inside of that overall up move, okay, inside of that overall move, you'll see these little peaks, right? If we go to a chart right now, you can see inside of this overall, let's find an overall up move so we can keep the drawing consistent with the chart. So here is an overall up move, and you can see there are these peaks. If we draw them out here, starting from this point, we can see that there are these peaks inside of this overall move up, right? Well, these peaks have names and they hold meaning. So first we'll draw this out and then we'll look at this on a chart, right? And then at the end of all of this, I'm going to show you how you know when a narrative is changing, okay? So in an uptrend consists of, and for those of you who already know this stuff, either stick around because you might learn something and something might click that you didn't already know, or just skip to the next video. It's completely up to you. If you're going to thug it out, just stay here. Okay. So in an uptrend consists of something known as higher highs. Oh, we'll just write it over here. Something known as higher highs, aka HH, or higher lows, aka HL. Okay? That is what an uptrend consists of. And do not overcomplicate this, okay? When we move up and we make a peak like a mountain peak, inside, okay, so inside of that overall trend, okay? Remember, this is an overall trend up at this point. When we move up and make a peak like a mountain peak, right? That is called a higher high, okay? Then when we move down, so when we pivot and go the other way and we move down and then price stops right here, that is called a higher low, okay? So now we have a higher high and we have a higher low. Now remember, an uptrend consists of these two things repetitively happening, okay? So if we're still in an overall, remember overall means narrative. If we're still in an overall uptrend, what is the next thing we want to happen? Don't we want to go up and make another peak, right? Because we're overall going up. And what does an overall move consist of? It consists of higher highs. Oh, you can't see it because of my little thing over here. But it consists of higher highs and higher lows, right? So we want that to keep happening. So after we make a higher low, what do we want to make? A higher high, right? Another peak. After we make another peak and we make a higher high, what do we want to make? Higher low, okay? We want that to keep happening inside of this overall move up. And once again, the overall move is the narrative that you mark up from point A to point B, okay? So you might ask now, so now that we know that, let's look at a downtrend example, okay? We're going to keep this here. I want to keep this on this screen. Okay, let's look at a downtrend example, and then let's tie this all together. Okay? So in a downtrend, okay, so now at this point in time, the narrative is price is moving down. That is the narrative, okay? So in a downtrend will look something like this. It'll come down, and then it'll go up. It'll come down, and then it'll go up. It'll come down, and then it'll go up. And we want that to keep happening, okay? If we are in a overall narrative downtrend, if the story is going down. If the story is going down, who is winning? The villains. The villains are winning, okay? The narrative is going down. Everybody on the same page. So, a downtrend consists of lower lows, aka LL, or lower highs, aka LH. It is the same process as the uptrend, but in reverse now. Let's go over it. So, if we start, let's start here at this point. Remember what the peaks were called in the uptrend? Higher highs. Think mountain, okay? Think mountain. They were called higher highs. It's the highest high. Well, it's not the highest high. It is a higher high, okay? So this is going to be a lower low, okay? Oh my God, my bad, hold on. Okay, I'm gonna edit that out. So this point here is gonna be called a lower high, okay? Could you guess what comes next? If this moves from this point here down to this point here, right here, that's called a lower low, right? And we want that to keep what? If we are in a overall down narrative, what do we want to keep happening? What do we want to keep happening? What comes after a lower low? Lower high, right? What comes after a lower high? lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high. Okay? If we're in an overall narrative, if we're in an overall down narrative and the villains are winning, this is what we want to keep seeing, all right? Now, let's talk about something. Why is it called a lower low? Okay, I want you to absorb this. This is kind of important. Why is it called a lower low? So we'll start here. Why is this called a lower low? This one right here. Could anybody guess? If you already know, shut up. Okay, this is called a lower low because this point here, right, is lower than this point here. Does that make sense? So this is lower than this, okay? So this point, so now we're looking at this one right here. This point here is lower than this point here. That's why it's called a lower low. Does that make sense? Okay. Why is this called a lower high? We'll start here. Why is this called a lower high? Could anybody guess why this one here is called a lower high? Right? Because this high is lower than this high. That makes sense? So looking at this one now, this high, so it's called a high because it came up, right? This high is lower than this high here. That is why it's called a lower high. So the motion you get is lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high. And we want that to keep repeating if we're in a downtrend. And real quick, we'll go over the bullish example. Okay? So if we're in an uptrend, so the narrative now, remember the narrative, okay? The narrative now is the heroes are winning. It's going up, okay? Because heroes move things to the sky, right? So when we're in a hero narrative, what we want to see is higher highs and higher lows, okay? So could anybody guess why this one here is called a higher high? Because this high is higher than this previous high. Does it make sense? So can anybody tell me why this high is called a higher high? Because this high here is higher than this previous high here. Okay? Don't overcomplicate it. Okay. So you see this higher low here now. Could anybody tell me why this is called a higher low? Listen to the word. Can anybody tell me why this is called a higher low? Because although this is a low, right, because it went down, so when it went low, drop it low, drop it low, drop it low. It went low, right? It's still higher than the previous higher low, right? So could you tell me why this is called a higher low? Because it's still higher than the previous higher low. Okay. So now that you understand that, when we're in a overall hero trend, what do heroes do? They move things up. They move things to the sky because they want to go to heaven. When we're in an overall hero trend, what do we want to see inside of the overall narrative? Higher highs and higher lows. If you didn't say that just now, go back to when I just started this and continue to watch it until it makes sense. Because I just broke it down in sticks and stones. And there's nothing wrong with that. Go back and continue to watch it until that makes sense, okay? Because this is important. When we're in a downtrend, so when we're in a villain narrative, because villains want to take everything down with them. They want to bring it all down. When we're in a villain narrative, what do we want to see inside of that villain narrative? Lower highs and lower lows. Okay, does that make sense? Now, let's talk about exactly what those lower highs and lower lows mean and what those higher highs and higher lows mean, okay? Now, I could deep dive into this, but we're going to keep it simple, okay? So, when we see a lower high, all that means, okay, keep it simple. Let's get a new color here. When we see a lower high, all that means is the narrative. Okay, let's keep it in video game terms. When you see a lower high happen in the market, all that means is the villains let the heroes bring their confidence up so that they can then stomp on them and laugh in their face. Does that make, okay, one more time. So let's start from the lower low. We're starting here. The lower low tells us that we are indeed in a villain narrative. How you should think of lower lows is these are the spawn points. These are the spawn points for heroes. You probably were thinking villains, huh? These are the spawn points where heroes spawn in at. Because remember what I said. Remember what I said about the hero candles? Did anybody write that down? Where do hero candles open up at? They open up at the bottom and they look to move up, right? Because heroes start off on the ground and they look to take to the skies. So are heroes going to open up at lower highs? No. So lower lows are the spawn points for heroes, okay? They're where heroes spawn in at. So when you see a lower low get made, understand that a group of heroes have spawned in and now they're looking to build their confidence and try to fight the villains, okay? When we make a lower high, what does that mean? So when we make a lower high, let's get a new color. When we make a lower high, what does that mean? This is where the villains, ooh, let's get a new color. I don't like that color. That color sucks. This is where the villains, I'm probably going to spell villains wrong. Vanilla. This is where the villains spawn in at, okay? So lower highs are where the villains spawn points are at, okay? Lower highs are where the villains spawn in at, okay? Because think back to when I was telling you about the candles. When there is a villain down candle, where does it open up at? Does it open up at the bottom? No, it opens up at the top. Why does it open up at the top? Because villains, they're fallen angels, right? They fall out of the sky. Villains want to bring everything down with them. They don't want to go up. They want to go down, right? That's how you need to think about that. So villains open up high. They open up high, okay? They open up at the top because they want to go down. So the lower highs are where the villains spawn points are, okay? So when we move down, when we move down, right? We're moving down. When we're moving down and we create another lower low, what happened to the previous lower low? Because now we've created another lower low, which is another camp, which is another group of what whose spawn point is a lower low? It is another spawn point for heroes, aka buyers, right? In trading terminology. But it's another spawn point for heroes. So you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what the heck happened to the previous group of heroes? Let's break down what happened. The buyers, the heroes spawned in. They spawned in. They were like, oh, okay, now might be our chance. They started to build their confidence up. Right? And then a group of evil villains spawned in. And they were like, yeah, I don't think so. They then proceeded to start fighting this group this group right here, they then proceeded to start fighting this group of heroes, where they ultimately were able to overcome them. How do we know that they were able to overcome them? Because we see that they were visually able to move below that group of heroes, right? Think about it in video games. If this is your spawn, do you want to let the enemy team come behind your spawn? Think about that. Do you want to let the enemy team come behind your spawn? No, right? So we know that the villains were able to overcome the heroes because they were able to move below their spawn, okay? Now you understand what is happening and what the lower lows and lower highs mean, okay? You have the context now. So now when you see a lower low and a lower high, when we go to the charts, I'll show you what these look like on the chart, okay? I'll show you again. But now you understand what is happening. You have the context. And this keeps happening, okay? This keeps happening. So when we're in the narrative of villains winning and we're making lower lows and lower highs, that is what is happening context-wise, okay? And until the buyers who are spawning in at the lower lows prove that they have taken control, this will keep happening. We'll keep printing lower lows and lower highs. The sellers will keep moving behind the spawn points of the buyers at the lower lows, okay? And we'll get to knowing when the buyers have proven themselves in a second, but let's look at this from the perspective of buyers now, okay? Before we move on to that. Real quick though, I'm gonna stand up and stretch. All right, look, so we're back. All right. Let's continue where we left off. So we are now looking at the overall an overall up move. So the heroes are winning the overall narrative in the story at this current moment in time, okay? Remember, an overall up move consists of a higher high and a higher low, right? We've already discussed why this is a higher high and this is a higher low, right? This is a higher high because it is higher than the previous high. This is a higher low because it is higher than the previous higher low, okay? That is as simple as it can get. So now let's discuss what is happening and what these higher highs and higher lows mean. Remember, the context behind this is that this is an overall move up, which means that the heroes are winning, right? Because the heroes want to take themselves to the sky. They want to move everybody up. They want to save everybody, okay? So let's first start here at the higher low, okay? In the previous example, buyers existed at the lower lows in a downtrend, right? The reason buyers exist at the lower lows in a downtrend is because, remember, don't overcomplicate it. Just like in a heroic candle, heroic candles open up at the bottom and they look to take to the skies, okay? They open up on the ground. They open up where it's the lowest point, lowest low. So looking at an uptrend, where do you think it is that the buyers would have their spawn camps at in an uptrend? Give you a second to think. If you said at a higher low, you are correct. The buyers are at higher lows in an uptrend, okay? So when the overall narrative is going up, the buyers' spawn camps are going to exist at higher lows, all right? So this is where the buyers are hunkered up at, right? Well, where do you think the sellers are hunkered up at in a overall heroic uptrend? If you said higher highs, you would be correct. Sellers exist above higher highs. So let's draw that out visually. So higher lows are the spawn points for heroes. And in trading terminology, these are the spawn points for buyers, okay? Heroes look to move price up, okay? Higher highs in a heroic narrative uptrend. Higher highs, let's use a different color. Higher highs are where villains, oh my god, I gotta stop doing that. Villains, I might be dyslexic. You know, I might actually be dyslexic. Oh my god. Hold on. Villains? I gotta stop doing this, bro. This is embarrassing. Higher highs are where villains spawn in at, okay? Remember, the context behind this is an overall move up, which means the heroes are winning. So, this is where villains spawn in at. Villains spawn, no. One second. Villains spawn in at higher highs, and heroes spawn in at higher lows, right? Let's break down that logic, because remember, villain candles open up at the top and they look to take things down with them, right? So they'll open up where it's the highest point. So villains look to open up at highest highs, right? In other words, villains look to open up high, heroes look to open up low. The reason villains look to open up above highs is because they want to take things down, right? The reason heroes look to open up below lows is because they want to take the things up, right? They want to save the things that are low. Does that make sense? Okay, that is as simple as it's gonna get anywhere. If that doesn't make sense, go back and watch it until it makes sense, all right? Draw it out visually. Get a notebook, and I want you to draw what it is I'm drawing until it makes sense in your brain, all right? Okay. So, let's read the context behind what is happening here. Remember, the context is I'm going to keep saying this because this is important. The context here is the overall move is going up, which means the heroes are winning, all right? So let's look at what's happening here. Starting at a higher high. Let's start where the villains have spawned in at, okay? So the villains have got the confidence to step into the battle, and they have set up camp here above a higher high, above where they look to take the narrative down. They begin to move the narrative downwards, right? And then they run into a hero spawn camp. So they start fighting. And by the way, the fighting, because remember, the things we're seeing on the candlesticks are periods of time, all right? The fighting takes place between a set amount of time. The set amount of time is everything in between these 2 points. It is from where the villains spawned in at. It is from where the villains spawned in at to where they ran into the group of heroes, okay? It is the length of time between these two camps. That is what the fighting is, okay? That is where the fighting took place. It doesn't matter what time frame you're on, so it doesn't matter which one of these time frames you click through, it is all the same thing. Understand that. Just know when you're on a higher time frame, it holds more meaning. Does that make sense? Okay. So now that you've heard that out of my mouth. So, like I was saying, the villains have ran into a hero spawn point. The heroes have the overall narrative on their side, so they're very strong. So they proceed to start fighting in the other direction, right? Think video games. Your team was down by 10 and now they're starting to come back. Okay? You're dropping fucking aces, you're getting aces, quadruple headshots, you're about to drop a fucking nuclear, pretty much. So the heroes start fighting back and they start pushing the villains back towards, they start pushing this group of villains back towards their spawn point. When is it that the heroes have completely wiped out this spawn point of villains? Can anybody guess? I'll let you think here for a second. I'll ask one more time. When is it that this group of heroes who have started fighting back against these villains have wiped out this spawn point of villains that tried to bring the narrative down, but they ran into trouble here where these heroes spawned in at? If you said when the heroes move past the spawn point of the villains, you would be correct. So when the heroes have moved past the spawn point for the villains where they spawned in at, the heroes have officially won that fight, okay? And they have complete control until a group of villains spawn in, okay, and then start moving those heroes back down. And that same fight will continue to happen until we get the narrative switch that we haven't talked about yet, okay? So, let's go over that again. We have talked about when we're in an overall uptrend, we have talked about what we want to see. We want to see higher highs and higher lows. When we are in a narrative downtrend, so the villains are winning overall, we want to see lower lows and lower highs. We have also talked about the context behind what these higher highs and higher lows mean, and we have also talked about the context of what these lower lows and lower highs mean. They are fighting. They are fighting for control the whole time. The fighting is the periods. The fighting is the periods between the two spawn points. From when the fighting begins to when the fighting ends, by either side getting knocked out. In this example, the heroes are knocking the villains out. It is the time period between these two fighting until one of them gets knocked out. That is the context. And if we are in an overall hero uptrend, we want to continue to see the heroes knock out the villain spawn points. Okay? Does that make sense? And vice versa for the overall villain downtrend. When we're in an overall villain downtrend, we want to continue to see the villain spawn points knock out the hero spawn points, okay? When heroes spawn in, they're like, okay, we're going to build the confidence to start fighting these villains. The villains go, no, I don't think so. And they start fighting back. And then once they move past the area where those heroes spawned in at, they officially won. And they look to go down until they run into another group of heroes who think they want to build up the confidence to go fight the next group of villains, right? And that cycle will continue to happen. Okay, so that should make sense to you now. I broke it down in Sticks and Stones, and I broke it down in Smooth Brain, right? If you're still struggling, book a one-on-one with me or come join my Discord. The links are in the description. Got it? Got it? Got it? Got it? Good. All right. Oh, I almost spilled my apple juice all over the desk. Bam. So this is like really basic stuff once again. So if you already know this stuff and you're like, oh, you didn't teach me anything new, bro, skip the video. I don't know to tell you. All right. This is for people who have been struggling and they want things to stick inside of their head. They want the concepts to stick inside of their head, okay? That's who this is for. Once again, I said that at the start of these, before I even started making these videos. This is for the person who needs a little bit more understanding and a little bit more hand holding. All right. So now that we have talked about the context behind these things, all right, inside of an overall up and an overall down villain trend and hero trend, we have to start talking about two things. One, when does the overall narrative change? What is the context behind the overall narrative changing? And yeah, pretty much those two things, okay? Okay. So, first of all, let's talk about, let me zoom out here and make more space for us. I don't want to delete any of this stuff because I want to tie it all together at the end. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Okay, let me get some more space. Okay. So, and don't worry, we're going to look at all of this on a chart and we're going to go over it just like we did here so you know what it looks like, okay? So, now let's talk about a narrative changing. We'll start with the heroic uptrend, okay? So, in a heroic uptrend, ooh, I like that. Can I change like the size of that? I can. Ooh, okay, I didn't know I had that. I've been using the brush the whole time. Okay. So in a overall heroic uptrend, right? So from a point A to a point B, it's kind of hard to use. So from a point A to a point B, we know what we want to see in this kind of overall narrative, right? We already know what it is we want to see. We just discussed it. How do we know when this narrative has changed? Simple. Stick with me, okay? If in this overall heroic narrative, and heroic narrative means to go up, we're wanting to see higher highs. Ooh, hold on, we're wanting to see higher highs, right? And higher lows, right? And we want to keep seeing that trend because that means that the heroes are winning. When do you think it is that the trend has changed? When do you think it is that the villains have officially, that's an even better way to ask this. When do you think it is that the villains have officially taken over of the overall narrative? Okay. Well, if this is a heroic narrative, and we know that this is a heroic narrative, how? Because every time that a group of villains spawn in, the heroes push past their spawn point, which prove that the heroes are maintaining control, right? Because you don't want somebody coming behind your spawn point in a video game. When do you think it is that the villains have taken control of a heroic overall uptrend? Could anybody guess? If you said, or if you were thinking, when the villains move past a spawn point of a group of heroes inside of that overall heroic overall narrative, the heroic uptrend, you would be correct. Why is that? We'll break down the context in a second, okay? No, we'll break it down right now, actually. The reason for that is because since the overall narrative is going up, that means that the heroes should be winning every single time, right? Right? So if we get a group of if we get a group of villains suddenly coming past a group of heroes, then this is a bit concerning, right? If you're looking to trade, if you're looking to be on the team of heroes, right? This is a bit concerning for you, because why are a group of villains taking control of your narrative? That means some massive villain just stepped in, some massive boss fight. Okay, we're not going to get into that yet, though. Some massive villain has just stepped in and changed the narrative. Okay? So, this narrative, believe it or not, hasn't officially changed. Why do you think that is? This might be a bit tricky. Because, let's go back. If this was supposed to come up, now stick with me. So we just made a higher low, which means we should make a what next? A higher high, right? If this was supposed to go up and make a higher high, but it stopped before it was able to take out this group of villains, and instead went back down and took out this group of heroes right here. Let's make that a different color. It took out this group of heroes right here, right? What does that make this right here? So let me shrink my pen. What does that make this right here? Since this didn't move up and take out this group of villains, what does that make this shortcoming right here? Well, in a uptrend, aren't we supposed to be making higher highs, higher low, higher high? Well, what does that make this? Could anybody guess? Well, isn't it a high? It's a high because it moved up, right? And we also know it's a high because a group of villains stepped in right here. How do we know a group of villains stepped in right here? Because the heroes failed to move it to this group of villains, right? They failed to move it to this group of villains, but how do we know that's a group of villains? Because they took out the heroes. A group of heroes wouldn't take out another group of heroes, right? So we know this is a group of villains. Where do villains like to camp? Where do they like to set up their spawn points? Above highs, right? So we know this is a high. What kind of high is it, though? Remember in a downtrend, right? If we go back to our downtrend, remember in a downtrend, when we're making a downtrend, where is it in this downtrend that villains like to set up camp when we're in an overall narrative going down? Lower highs, right? So if we go back to our example, this is a high. We know that because one, a group of sellers has moved the price down to take out the heroes, but also because it came up. But this is a lower high for two reasons. One, the first reason being this high, because this is still a high, this high is lower than this high here. It is still a high because it moved up, right? But it failed to get above this high here, which would make it lower. So this is a lower high. What else does a lower high exist within? Right? A downtrend, right? In a narrative downtrend, where is it that our group of sellers are setting up at? Above lower highs. So if we suddenly get a lower high inside of a narrative uptrend, right? If we suddenly get a lower high inside of a narrative uptrend, and this group of villains is able to wipe out this group of, so this group right here, this group of heroes, what comes after a lower high in a downtrend? A lower low. Let's use a different color. A lower low, right? A lower low, right? Well, why is this a lower low? Well, because we have moved down. any movement down is going to create a low, right? It is a movement down and it has created a low. But this low is lower than the previous low. Okay? This low is lower than the previous low, making it a lower low, right? So now we have a lower high and we have a lower low. So now we're starting to form a downtrend, okay? So now we are starting to form a downtrend because we have created a lower high and a lower low. The sellers have started to show their hand in this fight. They have really started to push back. This is something you do not want to see inside of an overall. So your narrative, the narrative you have marked up on your chart is an overall move up. You want to see higher highs and higher lows. You do not want to see a lower high suddenly get made inside of your narrative. And then after that lower high gets made, you do not want to suddenly see a lower low. Because then this is telling you that a group of villains stepped in, wiped out a group of heroes, right? And then down here, who sits below lows? Buyers, right? So let's continue with the narrative. So since we know in a downtrend, buyers sit below lower lows, right? Since we know in a downtrend, heroes sit below or lower lows, right? Because heroes open it up at the bottom and they look to take to the skies because they want to save everybody. Since we know there's a group of heroes down here below this lower low, what is it we want to see? What do you think it is we want to see? Well, what we would want to see is this group of buyers come up and take out this group of villains. We want to see them get revenge for the people, for the group of heroes here that they just slaughtered. That's what we would want to see to keep this narrative intact. However, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a narrative switch. If that did not happen, and instead this group of heroes that stepped in here started to move the narrative back up, right? But then all of a sudden they're stopped by something and they begin to turn back around. Who sits above highs? Villains. And this is another lower high. How do we know that? Because it is still a high because we have created a movement up, but it is a lower high because it is lower than the previous high. Who sits above lower highs in a downtrend? Villains, right? Sellers. Villains sit above lower highs. So if this group of villains spawn in here and stop these heroes from suddenly going up, right? They suddenly stop them and they begin to turn them around. If this group of buyers, if this group of heroes lose their line here, this is officially a narrative switch, okay? So if this group of villains who suddenly turned this group of heroes around who were trying to get revenge for this group of heroes who got wiped out in this overall heroic up move, if this group who was trying to get revenge for these guys who got wiped out, if they suddenly start to bring the battle back towards this group who wiped these guys out, but then suddenly they're turned around and they're met by a new force who is another group of villains, right? And they start to get turned around. If these guys get moved past, if their spawn gets moved past, what does this tell you? These guys got wiped out and these guys got wiped out. How is that happening in a overall move, in a overall heroic move up? Aren't we supposed to be moving upwards because this is a heroic move up? Why is that happening? Because the villains have grown a pair of massive cow testicles, and they have proven to you, because you are a player in this game observing until you decide to make a decision, they have proven to you that despite this being a heroic uptrend, they are ready to take control of the narrative. So, since this group got wiped out, and this revenge group got wiped out, this officially tells you that this is a narrative switch. So what we want to keep seeing happen now is another lower low be made. We want to see those group of heroes begin to start moving the battle back towards this group that wiped this group out. But then we want to see them suddenly be stopped by a group of villains who then proceed to move them back down and then wipe them out. And we want to see that keep happening, aka a villain narrative. Lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Ooh, I need to take a break. My arm is hurting. But does that make sense? Okay? That is as simple as it gets. And once again, we're going to go over this on the chart so you know what it looks like. But understand that logic, okay? I just explained to you the context behind the higher highs and the higher lows, and I just explained to you the context behind why a sudden lower high is appearing inside of a overall heroic move up. And I just gave you the context of when that group of lower highs suddenly wipe out a group of heroes, who it is that's trying to get revenge, and if they fail to get revenge, what that means. I just gave you all the context you need, okay? Because in this game of trading, it is context that is important. If you do not have context, you're going to find yourself on the wrong side of the game. Okay? So, I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to go over the same example, but with sellers from the seller side. So, once again, this was a heroic narrative changing to a villain narrative. Next, we're going to go over a villain narrative changing to a heroic narrative. I'm going to go a bit quicker though, because it is the same context, just reverse, okay? But I need to take a break. My fucking wrist is hurting. I'll be right back. I don't know how long this video is or how long it's getting. I might have to split it into 2 parts, or I don't know. I'll worry about that when I need to worry about that. Bro, I was like sitting. I don't know how long I was sitting or what I was doing with my hand while I was teaching you guys, but man, this shit is like hurting like right here. And it's like super like, I don't know, it's not numb, but it just feels like there's like pressure on my hand. I don't know what I did. It's like, it feels like my muscles tensing up, but so I might have to like move my hand a lot or something, or I don't know, but I don't know. Worst case scenario, I just pause the video and then finish it tomorrow. But let's try to finish this right now. So, we were getting into the narrative of the overall move is going down. So villains currently have control of the narrative. Okay, so let's draw that up. This is our overall narrative down from point A. Oh my God, come on, we can make that look a little bit better. From point A to point B. And what is it that we want to, let me check on my audio real quick. What is it that we want to see in a overall narrative move down? Does anybody remember? Want to see lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. You get the picture. That's what we want to see in a villain narrative to the downside. Oh my God, I did not try to do it. Okay, well, hold on, bear with me. Okay. So we've already broken down the context of the lower low and the lower highs inside of this narrative to the downside, right? Let's explain the trend switch, okay? So remember, the context here is that the villains have controlled the narrative for a set amount of time, okay? And now the heroes are looking to regain control of the battle. First, they will show us that they are looking to regain control, and then they prove to us that they have gained control by wiping out a revenge faction of villains, okay? It's the best way to explain it, but let's visually explain it. So in this example, we have a lower high, okay? And then here we have a lower low. So here we have a lower high, and here we have a lower low, right? Who exists at this lower high? We know whose camp this is. If you said that the person whose camp this is the villains, you would be correct. If this is the villain camp, that would make that, oh my god, I can't talk. If this is the villain camp here, that would make this the hero camp, right? Because heroes look to take things from the ground and bring them to the sky. So what we would want to see from here, since this is a villainous move down, is we want to see the heroes begin to move back up to try to attempt to contest this group of villains. But since this is a narrative going down that the villains have control of, what will ultimately happen is they will get wiped out, creating another lower low and lower high. These come in pairs, right? So when does the trend switch? The trend switches in a narrative to the downside when this group of heroes begin, let's get a different color, begin to move price up. So they begin to move price up, back up to challenge this group of villains. And as they begin to move price back up, that group of a new group of villains, that group of villains steps in, telling them, nah, go back down. This is our street. Like we're still controlling this shiz. And as this group of villains, let me get this out the way real quick. Oh, that was really big. Oh my gosh. As this group of villains, as this group of villains begins to push these group of heroes back down to take them out of their spawn camp and to create a lower low, as they begin to push them back down, suddenly, those group of heroes grow some massive freaking testicle balls. Oh. Suddenly, those group of heroes grow some massive freaking balls, and they say, no more! They say, no! Right? And then they start to move the battle back towards this group of villains. These guys are sweating now, bro. Like, whoa, what the? That wasn't supposed to happen. They're sweating, right? So, let's break this down play by play. These guys were supposed to move these guys down, but then suddenly a group of mighty heroes stepped in, and now they're taking the fight back to this group of villains. That's not supposed to happen. This is an anomaly. We were supposed to move down below this point and create a new lower low. Instead, what happened was an anomaly. Instead of moving below this point here, we created a new, could you guess? Could anybody guess what we created here? What do heroes sit below? Do they sit below highs or do they sit below lows? Heroes sit below lows, right? Because they open at the bottom and look to take the sky. We created a new low here because we moved down, right? But what kind of low is this? It is a higher low. So right here, let me use a different color. So this low right here, this is a higher low, right? Why is that? Because this low is higher than this previous low. You see how it's higher up? It's higher up. So it is a higher, but it is a low because it still moved down. So it is a higher low. In a uptrend, what do we want to see? Higher highs and higher lows, correct? So this group of heroic, massive ball heroes suddenly stepping in at this point is an anomaly inside of this overall move to the downside, right? Because the villains are supposed to have control of this. We're only supposed to make lower lows and lower highs. We're not supposed to make higher lows or higher highs, right? We're not supposed to do that. So that happening is an anomaly, and it's telling you something, okay? So right here. So what proceeds to happen next if this is a true trend switch? Oh, my bad. What proceeds to happen next if this is truly the heroes taking control of the narrative is they come up, they move the battle back towards this group of villains trying to keep them down, and they completely run through their spawn point. They have ran through their spawn point at this moment in time, reigning these group of heroes supreme. Do we want a reigning supreme group of heroes in an overall move down, in a overall villain move down? No, this is an anomaly, okay? This random group of heroes have reigned supreme over this group of villains. So what will then happen is so these guys are dead now. Let's write an X through them. So what will then happen is a new group of villains will see what just happened. They'll see what just happened to these guys here, right? And then they'll step in, and they'll push these cocky heroes back down. And the reason these new group of villains that just stepped in are pushing these heroes back down is because they're looking to take them out, right? They're looking to KI double hockey sticks them, right? They're looking to get revenge for these guys here, okay? They're looking to get revenge. So they're pushing this cocky group of heroes that just wiped these guys out back down. So these guys are looking to get revenge for these guys, okay? As they're moving them back down, suddenly, they set up a new spawn point, creating another higher low, right? So now we have two spawn points. 1, 2. 1, 2. Suddenly creating a higher low. And now they're driving the battle back towards this group of villains that were looking to get revenge for these guys, right? And as they drive the battle back towards them, they come past their spawn point, effectively taking them out of the game. So what we have here is overall context going down in favor of the villains, but an anomaly has stepped in to that context and completely changed it. The anomaly started here with this higher low, where it eventually took out this higher high, So then a new group of villains, seeing what happened to this group of villains, they spawned in here and began trying to push this group. These guys began trying to push these guys back down to get revenge for these guys here. But they failed to do so because these guys here set up a new spawn point and begin to push the battle back in their favor, effectively taking these guys out. So what we have here, you following with me? What we have here is a change in narrative. We are now making higher low, higher high. I just realized I wrote lower high here. My bad, guys. What we're now making is higher low, higher high, higher low, right? And since we just moved past this spawn point, it is a higher high. And the cycle will repeat itself. And now this group of villains are going to look to regain control of the narrative, right? So since these guys just got wiped out, a new group of villains, let me stop using doo-doo brown. A new group of villains is going to step in because they just seen what happened to this group of villains. They're going to step in and begin trying to drive this group of heroes that just took out this group back down, right? But if they're not able to move past this spawn point, right, and instead what happens is the group of heroes set up another camp, creating a higher low, and instead the group of heroes start to move the battle back towards them, and they get their spawn point taken out. Well, now we have another higher high, right, because we've moved higher than this point. And we want that to keep happening now, because basically what that shows us is a change in narrative, right? So let's break this down in dummy. When we have a narrative going in favor of the villains, and suddenly, right, so we're making lower low, we're making lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, and then suddenly we go up to make a lower high, but then a higher low gets made, and we know a higher low got made because we failed to close below the previous low, and that higher low takes out the group of villains that were supposed to push them down. When that suddenly happens, this becomes the anomaly. This isn't a confirmed narrative switch until a new group of villains step in, seeing what happened to this group of villains, and they begin to try to push this group of heroes back down that took these guys out here. They begin trying to push them back down, and they fail to do so, and another spawn camp, another higher low, another anomaly is set up, and these guys are ultimately taken out again. This is a confirmed narrative switch. The narrative has now switched from a villainous narrative to the downside to a heroic narrative to the upside, right? Because heroes are looking to take it up now. Boom. So now we have covered all of the context. We have covered the context behind what higher highs and higher lows mean. And we have covered the context behind what lower lows and lower highs mean. And we have covered the context behind what a narrative trend switch looks like and also what it means, okay? So now that we understand, well, first of all, let me say this. If that still doesn't make sense to you, and I just broke it down in sticks and stones, and that's completely fine if it doesn't make sense to you, you have 2 or 3 options here. Go back and rewatch this from the beginning, or look at my description, schedule a one-on-one with me so I can work with you directly, or join my Discord, and then at me in the Discord, or another member of the Discord will help you out if you're still confused. I am looking to build a community of people who want to help each other and share their knowledge, just like this. We don't gatekeep over here, bro. There's no reason to There's no reason to gatekeep. It's all free public knowledge. Everything I'm teaching you, I learned from different places. I just put the context together myself and broke it down in a way that made sense to me. And now I'm giving it to you, okay? Now, don't get me wrong. There's so much more to this. There's so much more. It goes so deep. It goes so deep. It goes really deep. It gets to like a spiritual level. But we're not talking about any of that right now. We're just keeping it simple. Sticks and stones, okay? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but the trend will never hurt me. Yes, okay, that was stupid. The trend will definitely hurt you if you're on the wrong side of it. But, okay, now that we understand that, so you know what to do if you still need help. Now that we understand that, let's go to a real chart and see what these trend switches look like for both sides, okay? And okay, let's just go to the chart. So the first trend switch